One question that's been asked since forever is, what will the end of the world be like? How will we feel, or what will we feel? Will we feel happy during this moment? For some, that's probably the case. For others, it will probably be filled with fear, anger, and rage. Rage that everything you've known, from the people around you to the small, insignificant things you've grown up with, will no longer be there. You'll no longer be there. It's thoughts like these that plague my mind, as do many others, as we walk this sometimes aimless existence. We know that we're here for a certain amount of time, and that time is getting shorter. The question isn't really how we get there, but when. When does it happen? What will it look like? And the thing that'll have the answers to these questions is a comic I read a few weeks ago called Promethea. I know maybe you were expecting something else, but just hear me out. Promethea is a story written at the tail end of the 1990s, and it ran all the way till 2005. The writer of said story being Alan Moore, writer of some of my favorite stories, not only in comics but in fiction in general. Watchmen, V for Vendetta, Swamp Thing, Miracle Man, and so on. The thing about Alan Moore's stories, specifically the ones in the superhero genre, are all plagued with the idea of gods living among men. That idea being of something so far beyond our reach can literally be within our society, and most of the time, we wouldn't even notice. Because you see, many of them before reaching beyond human comprehension were like us. They were probably a famous person, some really smart scientist trying to break new ground, or the kid that used to sit behind you during your math class that no one wanted to sit next to. And Promethea is no different. The story of Promethea begins in Alexandria in the year 411 AD, with the beginning panel showing us feet, or the feet that belong to Christians of this era, who have come to Alexandria for the sole purpose of killing a witch or devil worshipper. The man they seek being the father of the young girl Promethea. He tells her that she must escape while she can, that one day in the far future they will meet again in the western lands. Promethea, while she doesn't want to leave her father's side, runs as fast as she can, without looking back, with tears pouring from her eyes down to her face. As faintly in the background, you can hear her father's unfortunate demise as we fade into black. The year is 1999 AD in the dirty and grimy city of New York. However, it's not the New York you're familiar with, the one you see in Spider-Man or the Avengers or the countless other superheroes you associate this city with. This version of the city is more Fifth Element than anything else. It's our idea of the future. Flying cars that look like UFOs, multiple highways overlapping each other leading to different areas. Huge buildings that feel taller than the Empire State, billboards signaling different types of marketing and businesses that add to the background as the rain quietly pours onto the rooftops of homes. It all feels so closed in and suffocating, but that's the brilliance of this world crafted by Alan Moore and artist J.H. Williams III. The story follows 19-year-old Sophie Banks, who's writing a term paper on Promethea for her college class, after finding multiple accounts stating weird sightings of a magical warrior queen throughout the decades. Her findings lead her to a woman named Barbara Shelley, who agreed to meet with Sophie and conduct an interview about her husband's work on Promethea. But just as Sophie starts touching upon certain topics, Barbara dismisses Sophie and tells her to drop her research on the whole thing, and leaves her with a warning. You don't want to go looking for folklore, you especially don't want folklore looking for you, with the second half of the warning already being put into motion. Sophie already being followed by this tall black shadow called the Smee, Luckily, folklore tends to come true in comics, with Promethea herself showing up to save Sophie, while also being injured during the process. The identity of this version of Promethea being revealed to be Barbara Shelley, the person Sophie interviewed prior to her transformation. And with that, the confirmation that Promethea has been an entity that has used many vessels throughout time in order to manifest into our reality. As she says, Promethea, who was once all great and powerful, has now become more like her, weak and brittle. The only person who can take the mantle and save them both from the monster hunting them is none other than Sophie Banks, who must write a poem or description in order for Promethea to use her body as a vessel, which she does. Promethea now being reborn through Sophie, and with it her own fire to defeat the shadowy creature. Promethea picks up Barbara and flies off into the endless night sky, which then begins one of my favorite fantasy stories that I've ever read. A journey through magical and wondrous lands that only can be constructed through the borders of comic books. Sometimes those very borders being broken, becoming something more. From chapters where characters that existed in my childhood would appear, like the Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf, or the Pied Piper. Scenarios where evil magicians would summon countless hordes of demons to go up against Promethea, which would then result in double-page spreads that even the hardcover omnibus, which I own, cannot capture its grandeur and scale. Moments where the story slowed down and became one of exploring the universe, encountering gods who've existed before the first human was created. Moments where characters would go on a huge journey of self-discovery and the reunion of family members who were long gone. Promethea's reality becomes Sophie's. In turn, Sophie's reality becomes ours. I guess there are many examples throughout Promethea that I can point to for you to understand this. But if I were to dial it back to the specific moment where it all came together, where it all made sense to me, was when I came across this image right here from issue 13, right before Promethea starts her journey to the beyond. It's a magnificent piece where we see all types of otherworldly beings, a woman wrapped around by a snake from head to toe, scissors that take flight with angel wings as their support, a boot that resembles something of a spider than an actual, well, boot. And I wanted to show you this picture in black and white so when it changes color, you can see what I saw, you can feel what I feel, and while there are many things occurring in the image, it all works in harmony like music. It's peaceful yet dense. Peaceful and dense yet filled with beauty and wonder and awe. As to what comes next, you can really feel that a brand new journey is about to begin, and we are right there, right behind Sophie and Promethea every step of the way. We walk through countless layers of reality, beaches of green, paths that are literal representations of infinity, crossing paths with ancient gods and writers from previous times, even walking the same path as death. And by the end of it, just like Promethea, you've come to somewhat of an understanding of what you've experienced. The incomprehensible has become sensible. A light has been shown, a doorway unlocked in your mind. Now, Promethea isn't only a superhero story, even though it fully is, but it's from chapters 12 through 24. The story itself takes the form of a lecture, hiding under the robes of mystery and adventure. A lecture into magic that at first glance can be very daunting, as it was for me. Countless words and images flooding on the page, double page spreads that seem so chaotic and at times hard to follow, and yet it still all works. All of these events I've spoken about leading to one inescapable conclusion, the end of the world, Promethea being the one to commence the apocalypse. But before I dive into the type of apocalyptic nature that is this apocalypse, we have to take a quick look at the other works from Alan Moore that also end with an apocalypse or signs of the world ending, specifically these, Miracle Man and Watchmen. I'm only diving into these because I think these two are the ones that capture the bleakness of what an apocalypse can be in comics. Miracle Man for one is rather interesting because at first glance when reading the arc Olympus, this version of the apocalypse starts off by Miracle Man being introduced to the idea of ending the world, but not how you might think it might be. This version is more about evolution than anything else, the concept of humanity reaching a state of perfection by eliminating racism, eliminating prisons and poverty, war, death. In essence, these are all good things, but at the loss of the human experience, living, dying, making mistakes and learning from them, humans becoming a shallow version of ourselves, so to speak. When everything is perfect, is there any point in existing at all? As for Watchmen, it dives more into what you might think would happen, leaning more on the movie Threads in 1984. What would happen if nuclear fallout were to happen, only with superheroes involved? Granted, it never comes to that, but throughout the entire story, it does linger in the back of your mind. When the time is right, when the doomsday clock hits 12, it'll all end. Only radiation and people upon masses would be left dead. What we feared has become reality. Other examples are the Last of Us TV show, showing us a very real possibility of a fungus evolving and infecting humans, making them eat each other. Or Mad Max, another example of war destroying humankind, bringing us back to a more barbaric time period. H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, where in its final days the Earth stops rotating on its axis as it orbits the sun. The sun has grown in scale that it takes up 1/10 of the sky. In 30 million years, giant crabs, butterflies, and squid-like creatures are the last of any life on Earth. All of these being predictions of sorts of the end of the world. But now the question is, and what this whole video has rested upon, is what makes Promethea's version so different from the many upon many examples of the apocalypse. And to fully understand that, we have to take a literal descent from the magical and beyond to the more grounded and ordinary life of Sophie Bangs. Up to this point in the story, Sophie returns from her quest in the Tree of Life, with immediately another problem arising. You see, before leaving, Sophie had given permission for her friend Stacia to merge with one of the versions of Promethea from the past. The battle-hardened warrior Grace, who she entrusted to protect the world from any dangers, since she and her version of Promethea won't be around. With Stacia and Grace developing a loving relationship during the short time they were fused together. Well, Sophie's back, but Grace and Stacia refuse to give her back the reins of being the current Promethea to exist despite Sophie's demands, which she then causes them to get into a fight, then into a trial in the immaterial world, where it's then decided that Grace and Stacia will be separated, and Sophie to be the current Promethea, since her role is meant to be for a greater purpose. However, after that's all said and done, the FBI shows up and picks everyone up, since throughout the story, they've been trying to arrest Promethea and anyone involved with her. Which brings us to multiple shocking moments. Sophie's friend Stacia being shot, a magician who served as a teacher for Sophie arrested, and Sophie saying goodbye to her mother as she runs onto the rainy streets of Neo, New York, with the raindrops quietly hitting the rooftops. You ever feel like you're having so much fun, but now that time is up, and you have to go back to your responsibilities which you don't care about, but you do it anyway because you kinda have to? It almost feels like reality hits you in the face. Well, I think this cover of Promethea perfectly captures that. From the moody green color filling the entire panel to the mug by her side, the tiny sign that says "Sorry, no checks," or the terrible movie poster in the back named Beetleman hang just beside the new sales sign they have all new for $1. It's not like the ones before it, filled with epic mysticism or the epicness you'd expect from a fantasy story. It's just regular and ordinary. No superheroes, no magical beings, just Sophie sitting quietly, reading a newspaper in the DVD rental shop where she works. From the long Airbus ride home from a long days of work, the colors changing from dark blues to a moody yellow, the intimacy between male and female, the stillness that comes from watching a TV show while smoking at 1 a.m. Sophie by this point has been on the run for 3 years, and that time has run out. She's surrounded by the Golden Age hero Tom Strong, who's trying to stop Sophie from changing into Promethea, but It's too late. She recites her poem with Promethea bursting through the comic book borders, and with her rebirth, the apocalypse begins. Promethea going through New York, tearing down the barriers between the imagination and reality. Time begins to exist all at once. Another big bang is about to be triggered. People exist in a purely idea-based world, and in order to perceive this new world Promethea is creating, science isn't enough to actually fully understand it. Your mind must evolve to another level. We all are a part of one thing, and then darkness. But before that darkness settles in, you get to sit next to Promethea for the last time. The last time you see her by a fire, she speaks to you like a child does when they sit with their mother. And she tells you she ended the world to open your eyes to the universe, and with a whisper she says, "That's how it is with stories. They're always about you, aren't they? And they always have a beginning, and there's always an ending for all stories, for everyone. Let there be light." If I were to sum up all of Promethea, it's this weird yet beautiful story that introduces you to magic, and a celebration of the medium of comics. It's why it's remembered and its effect is still felt 23 years later. As for the answer to the question, what makes the apocalypse that takes place in Promethea so different from the nihilistic nature of other stories depicting the apocalypse? Well, it's just that there is no nihilism in it. In fact, it celebrates life and touches upon the idea of what if we were to just be much nicer to each other? What if our imagination was integrated into our everyday life post the end of the world? And while there are still lingering problems in the new world like poverty and crime, the people in it, us, we've learned to approach these things in different ways. It may not be a utopia, but a world that's more caring and loving is a world that should be strived for. Promethea was needed to usher in a new world, but if she doesn't exist, then write a description or poem, remember it, then close your eyes, recite your words, and she'll hear you. Thanks for watching. I know it's been like almost 8-9 months since my Steel Ball Run video, but I had to take care of a couple of things, but hey, I'm back. Expect more videos soon and hit the bell notification to get notified whenever a new video pops up. Like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.